Hello, everyone. Guillaume Nisval here, host of the E-commerce Wizards podcast, where I feature top leaders in business and e-commerce. Today's guest is Vlad Mkrtumyan, co-founder and CEO of Logic Inbound. Today, we'll be talking about SEO and advertising for e-commerce growth with a focus on SEO, search engine optimization. Before we get started, our sponsorship message. This episode is brought to you by Mage Montreal. If a business wants a powerful e-commerce online store that will increase their sales, or to move piled up dormant inventory to free up cash reserves, or to automate business processes to gain efficiency and reduce human processing errors, our company, Mage Montreal, can do that. We've been helping e-commerce stores for over a decade. Here's the catch. We're specialized and only work on the Adobe Magento e-commerce platform. We're among a handful of certified Magento companies in Canada. Even if a company does not have a Magento site, we've gone lots of site over. We do everything Magento. If you know someone who needs development, maintenance, training, support, we got their back. Contact our support team at support@magemontreal.com or go to magemontreal.com. That's MAGE Montreal.com. All right. And just before we start as well, a shout out to Robert Rand of JetRail Hosting, who connected us, Vlad. So thank you, Robert, for making this happen today, basically. Yeah. And Vlad, well, I'm happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
All right. And you know, SEO, let's just jump into it. Like SEO and advertising for e-commerce growth, like SEO is a very challenging topic for merchants. You know, you can go read websites yourself if you want, like on moz.com and stuff like that, but still it's hard to make head or tails of it, or you have to invest a lot of hours or say what's still relevant today for SEO. That's not old tactics. Make sure you approach it the correct way. Like, you know, SEO is not voodoo. It can be broken down to some kind of science of reverse engineering Google in a way, and some other more advanced strategies there. Let's just jump into it. What would you tell a merchant who's looking to do SEO nowadays?
That's a great question. I would tell a merchant that SEO comes down to three things, right? When it comes to their website, there's content, which is basically all the writing on your website. There's the link building, which is really all your online popularity. And then there's the technical element of your website, right? The UX, the internal architecture, the page speed, right? So if I could teach anybody three things at all about SEO during this whole podcast, right? It would be focus on content, focus on link building, and focus on the technical element of your site. If you nail those three things, right, your website will be phenomenal. Most people, right, they'll have one of those three things wrong, right? And we worked with companies, the Fortune 500s, all the way down to locals, you know, flower shops. And it's always been one of those three things, right? Working with a global company right now, for example, global software affiliate company, right? And we're working on the technical element for them, right? We worked with other companies that started from zero. They don't have enough online authority, right? They're not a global Fortune 500, so they need more online authority. They need more link building. And then sometimes most people that are just coming in, they don't understand how to optimize their H1 tags, the titles of their pages, the descriptions. They don't understand what words to put. When should something be a landing page, blog post, etc.
Okay. All right. So let's talk some examples. Let's say you're a merchant with 40,000 products in your catalog, whatever the amount. You say, okay, we've done, let's say, good ads in the past. We have not done SEO yet. Like, where do we start with this? Like, what should I do as a merchant?
Great question. It all starts with the keyword research. Every single campaign, right? You got to make sure you're focused on the right keywords, right? It's like if you're, I don't know why this example comes to mind, but let's go this way. If it comes to war, right, and you're pointing the missiles, the keyword research is like making sure, hey, are they pointed in the right direction? You know, and that's why you got to make sure you're targeted, you're focused on the right things. And the beautiful part about your example you just gave me is you gave me a little cheat. You said, if I've done ads already. If you've done ads already and you're not basically just starting from complete scratch, doing something like Google Ads, pay-per-click, right? You can actually guarantee that the keywords you're going to rank for are going to convert, because the Google Ads, obviously in the organic search, they appear right next to each other, right? So we actually, whenever somebody says, hey, we've done Google Ads, pay-per-click, then we go in and we actually look at those terms that they've used and say, these are the perfect terms. And then after we look at those terms, then we organize that by competition. we look at competitors, we look at primary, secondary, tertiary type keywords, et cetera. But that's where I would start if you've done ads before.
Okay, and let's keep diving. Okay, so your first step is keyword research. Great. Now you've done the keyword research and you were lucky there was Google Ads. You got the data from Google Ads at which keyword was converting into sales. So this is the right keyword to focus on. What do you do next?
Great. So now you got the right keywords, right? And so what you got to do is you basically got to go ahead and you got to create outlines of every keyword. And by the way, sure, you've done the Google ads, but sometimes you find some informational keywords that are easier to rank for, less competitive, right? Because let's pretend we have a company selling microphones because we're in the podcast right now, right? And so our e-commerce microphone store, right? It's basically buy a microphone. That keyword is going to be super duper competitive, right? So we've got to do maybe some informational keywords as well in the keyword research, such as what types of microphones are the best in 2021? What's the best microphone for podcasting? Why does my microphone not work? Right. Maybe those types of kind of like tertiary, I would say, keywords that are still have some, if you look at the buyer journey, right? When they type in, is my microphone broken? That's still a valuable keyword because it could be that could still get us microphone sales, but it's not like, hey, buy Blue Yeti 2021, that should sponsor this podcast, but not. But basically, those are different levels of buyer journey keywords, right? But you still want to have those, but still Google Ads is a great place because those are great keywords. So yeah, we complete all the keyword research. After the keyword research, the next thing we do is we create outlines. A good SEO outline has the meta title, B, the meta description, the H1, the H2. The H1 is like the title of your page. The H2 is all like the sub paragraphs, the subtitles, right? The length of the keywords actually we found do matter, even though some SEOs will argue with me till death that it does not matter. But I would say it definitely does matter. And, some will say it depends, but it really depends on the keyword. You can look at competitors to see the length, right? So those are the main kind of things you want to have, the top 5 for an outline. So once you've got this outline, you hand it off to a writer and you get the page created.
Okay, so we're going toward content creation. So you got the keyword nailed down first. Now you're going to an outline of what should be the content creation. You're getting content created. And what's the rest of the plan like to actually go all the way to getting new clients, new sales?
Yes. So basically, now that you're creating content, and you might want to, like I said, those other informational pieces are useful because they position you as an expert, such as like, is my microphone broken, et cetera, right? You have to think of different keyword lists and do research. You can use different software. We like to use Ahrefs, right? You can use Moz. Shout out to Evan Fishkin, one of our partners here, whose brother ran Fishkin built Moz, and it comes from that family that built Moz actually. But basically, you can use all, SEMrush. There's a million different tools you can use, right? We've used basically all of them, right? We've even built our own internal proprietary ones. But so then you use the tools to do the keyword research and see what's most competitive, least competitive, et cetera. You write those pages out. After you write those pages out, the next thing you need to do is, I would say, link building, right? And also in the first 2 weeks of our campaigns that we do, we also do a technical analysis, meaning, we go through the website, see, are there any broken pages, right? Are there any 404s? Is the website slow, right? As you know, in the e-commerce world, I think it's for something like every second that the website doesn't load, it's crazy. It's like you lose about 10 to 15% of the buyers on your site for every second, right? So you want to just make it like just a snap and it loads really fast as possible, right? So what's the speed? What is any 404 broken pages? That's really bad. What's the internal architecture? Is it easy to navigate the website, right? So those are the technical parts of it. So we do that in the first 2 weeks as well. And then the authority building. Authority building, I like to say, is a sales game and it's a knowledge sharing game, right? So it's the reason I say, authority building, by the way, is also link building. So that's what I mean when I say link building. Remember, content, links, and technical. I'm always talking about one of these 3 things. And so after you do, I would say do technical analysis in the first 2 weeks of the campaign, do, your keyword research, then basically, and start writing those keywords. Then the link building element is you go out, you build relationships with other business owners, with other websites, and then you start getting listed everywhere online. So when Google looks around, they're like, wow, this is the belle of the ball, this website on this, microphone topic.
Okay, so what changed? Because link building has evolved a lot over the years.
Yeah.
Like, what works in 2021 for link building?
Yes, great question. Back in the olden days, right, you could do things such as link wheels and link farms and get away with all these spam, horrible tactics, right? You used to also just be able to simply, I would say today also, people still do cold email outreach for guest blog posts, which still works. However, right, the tiny thing there is people know the value of a guest blog post. Even those that are not SEO savvy will still try to charge you for a guest blog post because they know that somehow it affects Google. Whereas, in the early days, people would just do it for sharing, et cetera. So the cost of a link has probably increased over time, right? Because you can't just like get away with these hacky tactics anymore, right? But what works, I would say, is, a simple tactic is going in and then analyzing using something like Ahrefs and analyzing competitors' backlinks. I guess that's a little too complicated for the guest. Somebody who doesn't have software out there, right? A really simple tactic is just to get on like social websites and get some good PR, right? Like get on podcasts, make sure you're on Twitter, make sure you're on LinkedIn, et cetera, right? And then start interacting with journalists and having them write about you. Because if you find that right topic, and it's about your business and it's also like a hot trend, and those two intersect, you can explode in link building ability if other journalists start picking up this topic and you're the source.
Okay, any tips on that? Any ways to help the merchant like brainstorm on how to get that
yes,
kind of
100%, right? So you can go on Help a Reporter Out, Haro, right? There's other websites like Quoted, et cetera, right? And if you sign up on those, then you can actually start answering questions, right? So that's a very simple, basic way to build links. And once you look at the topics that are trending, right, and see kind of what is everybody on Haro asking me, then you can say, okay, well, this is really popular in my, microphone website niche. And then you can go in and then you can start you can start tweeting about it and talking to other, sources online, other website owners, et cetera, right? So that's a very simple topic right there. You can just go on Haro, you can answer directly, that will equal backlinks. And then the other thing is, just basically networking with reporters and pitching them organically yourself. Another thing you can do, I mean, we can talk about a whole hour, by the way, just on link building itself. The other thing you can do is you can go in and then you can actually go ahead and build relationships, right? Building relationships. That's why I actually commonly say link building is a sales game, because I'm convincing you to do something for me, which is sales, right? And so if you build relationships with other websites, for instance, if somebody has a website that sells headphones, right? Headphones and microphones, they kind of go together, right? You pick the niches that are, basically related to you, right? And then you can get backlinks from those guys and you can build some good business strategic relationships, right? Like, me and you were talking about how, agency life is, et cetera, right? We can exchange blog posts, right? You're not really directly competing with me, right? But then
not at all. Actually.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right. But then if your friend who has, let's go back to this microphone thing, has a recording website and he sells recorders, right? It still kind of has the same audience members, right? So that's still a good backlink. Now there's different types of backlinks, right? And so when we look at a website, we look at the different footprints of a backlink. And you tell me how deep down the rabbit hole you want me to go, by the way.
As long as it's generally easy to understand, we can go as deep the rabbit hole as you want here, because that's what it is. Like, we need to know what works in SEO, or the merchant, if he's talking with an SEO agency, like that he understand what he's buying, what we're talking about here,
So I would say there's different types of backlinks, right? And I'm trying to avoid getting too technical, but basically imagine, there's something I call a backlink footprint, right? And so different types of websites give you different backlink authority, right? And there's simple questions that I can ask and the audience members will naturally know, right? For instance, if you're featured on Shopify, right? Versus if you're basically just create a Twitter profile, which backlink do you think is worth more? Right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an easy one.
Right. So this is what you should think about when you're building backlinks, because some are more valuable than others, right? And what you can do is you can use software out there like Ahrefs to analyze other websites' backlink footprints and
Right.
seeing what kind of backlinks do they have. Do they have a lot of social backlinks? Do they have a lot of news articles? Are they a part of different forums? Are they a part of different directories, et cetera? And then you can kind of go in and try to get those types of backlinks yourself.
We'll still give the answer for the audience, So obviously, because that's a very large company, publicly traded company, it's huge, has huge authority online. And even though you could say the same about Twitter, just that Twitter link, the Twitter post is nothing unless it gets endorsed and all that. And it's not a page in itself, so it has no value other than the traffic it would drive to your site, that Twitter post versus
the reason. And the reason the Twitter backlink isn't worth as much, right, is especially for e-commerce sites, right? It's because Twitter doesn't just focus on e-commerce, right? Twitter is for anybody. Anyone can go create a Twitter profile, right, and create a Twitter post, right? It's very simple and easy to build. However, Shopify does not just give anybody a backlink, right? Shout out to them for featuring me. But basically, Shopify does not actually just hand them out willy-nilly, right?
Yeah.
So
and just to clarify that, even though we're talking Shopify, it could be like having a backlink, like being featured, let's say, on Apple.com, on Microsoft.com, whatever. We're just talking about not the platform Shopify, but being featured on their site, just like being featured on any other large, highly authoritative site.
Yes. And going back to the headphones thing, right? Also, if it's in your niche, that's even more powerful because it can even turn into direct sales. For instance, if you have a microphone website and you're featured on the blueyeti.com website, right? Then their audience could actually go in and buy from you directly, right? So that's why getting a niche appropriate backlink can be so powerful. For instance, your friend that, let's say we have the microphone selling website, your friend that has the recording software website, right? Or the recording gear, if he features you on, his homepage or whatever in a blog post, right? And if it's a great written blog post, that could turn into sales versus the Twitter profile is going to be a bit harder. Anybody can do it. That's why, we think that obviously I don't have the algorithm of Google, but what we've seen through our research is that it impacts it less. Lastly, another thing that you do not want to do is you do not want to get the same backlink. I actually talked to a guy who owned a clothing store and he thought he was a genius because he had about 10,000 posts on Facebook linking back to himself, 10,000 posts on Twitter, 10,000 posts on all these different social media sites. And he said, you need to give me a guy at Google to tell them that we have so many backlinks, that we're worth so much. And I'm like, look, it's not. If anybody else, right, can do that, right, it's not really that valuable because everybody can copy that tactic, right? It's just really spamming. So there's something that I would say that's very vital for people to know is there's diminishing returns. Meaning, if I get 1 or 2 backlinks from a website, you don't really need to get more than that, right? Yeah. Unless maybe it turns into more sales, and obviously you'll get more.
Because Google knows they're all coming from the same website. At one point, just like, okay, well, whatever, and doesn't give you more point for it.
Yeah. So it's literally last week, by the way, I was talking to this client, and he thought he was a genius. He's like, look, we have these 10 websites. We have over 400,000 backlinks. He's like, go get somebody. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. And sometimes you just can't explain things to people. So that's some of the hardships of my industry. But yeah, so that's basically backlink building, right? You want to get listed on all these different websites, right? And there's all these different tactics you can use, right? Cold email, sometimes we use that. Infographics is something we've used as well before. So you make a really interesting statistic, right? Or, create an infographic. An infograph is basically just like a picture with all of these different numbers and data on it, right? If anybody out there, you type an infograph on there, it's like a really piece of interesting like data picture. And then you share it with maybe either not a competitor, but some competitors aren't going to do anything, but somebody in your industry or somebody tangentially related to your industry, right? Say, hey, I want to promote this infograph for our industry. Can you can put it on your website if you link back to me, right? So back to the holistic concept of sales. I'm giving you something, I'm getting something back, right? Right. Like for instance, I'm on this podcast, right? It's very easy now for you to build, a backlink on my website, right? So you can think about it that way as well, right? You're building the relationship, business development, sales. You're giving me a podcast, right?
Yeah.
I'm giving you,
You're a guest here, so we'll give a link to your site, and here you go. That's the backlink.
There you go, right? And then on the flip side, somebody out there could even do a podcast, could say, hey, would you be interested in me interviewing you? You could start a podcast on your industry. Like you could start a microphone podcast or whatever, right? And then you could say, hey, look, I'll basically give you all the content. I'll edit it, right? And I'll give you this podcast episode, right? For an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, right? And then in exchange, you can put it on your website, but I would love a backlink back. That's another valid backlink building strategy.
It's an exchange. You give something, you get a backlink in exchange.
Exactly. Right. And people understand that value, but it's just hard for people to come up with these ideas. And what I tell them is it's like if you bought a Tesla, right? Maybe you're just driving around in a normal car, but the second you buy a Tesla, right, and you're online, once you start driving that Tesla, you see Teslas everywhere, right? Same thing with backlink building, right? Like the second I show somebody a backlink, right, and they see one and they see, from Twitter posting somewhere else and they start training themselves that way, they'll see links everywhere and they'll come up with tons of different link building ideas.
So your focus is mainly on content generation, basically giving value to a third party who has some level of authority, ideally in the same niche, same or similar, focus of industry. So it's a relevant link. By being a relevant link, you can get, endorsement, the link juice, as they used to call it, passing from their site to your own, which is good for your Google ranking, but also potential clients directly. With your example of Blue Yeti, the microphone company, so you could have a customer coming from their website if they were to feature you, and that specific link helps you with your ranking in Google about microphones. So, okay.
Exactly. You want to figure out what is the sales game for this industry or for this website, right? Like what resources whenever I talk to a client, like what resources do they have? Do they have writers, right? So guest blog posts for backlinks really easy, right? It's just that guest blog post for backlink, right? That's the sale people are spamming everybody's inbox if you have a valuable website, right? They're spamming you saying, hey, we want to do a guest blog post. Can we just, add us to this article, right? Or we want to do a guest blog post. Just please give us a backlink, right? How much does it cost to do a featured post? The problem is it's just not valuable because everybody's offering that, right? Which is why I feel like the podcast example I gave, right, is more unique, right? So you've got to have some kind of unique value that you're giving out, right? Or a unique perspective, right? Getting covered on Fox and CNN and all these news sites is still valuable, right? But there's just still levels, right? If you get interviewed by the industry leader in your industry, right, that's a lot more valuable than just like a general thing. But it's still, right? They're related because the cool part about this is the more authority you build, the easier it's going to be, right? Like for every single podcast you record, the easier it's going to be to record the next one because you're getting into that rhythm and the flow. You're building the authority. It's normal,
Yeah, you get that snowball effect going on, basically. That's what you're saying. You're building upon previous efforts.
Yeah.
Okay. So what kind of cadence would you give to a merchant in terms of like that content creation to be able to see returns and getting sales out of this thing?
Great question. To basically keep on the backlink topic, then I'll get off it because I can talk about for an hour, 2 hours just on this topic alone for backlink. We can go as long as you want. But basically, there's something called link velocity. Link velocity is how quickly are your competitors in your website niche building links, right? I imagine the microphone e-commerce store that we were thinking of starting is going to be insanely competitive, and the link velocity is very high, and everybody's getting backlinks like every single day, right? So that's probably high, right? Versus maybe we start, I don't know, an iPhone case website selling iPhone cases, maybe a lot less competitive, So that's link velocity, right? So we study a competitor's link velocity. Same thing with content, right? There's competitors' content velocity, right? And how much content do they write and their content footprint, right? So you can do the same thing for your business, right? Is when you study your top 3, top 10 competitors that you think are doing great, right? How much content do they have? That's how you figure out how much content to write. But I don't want to weasel my way out of the answer, right? The joke in the SEO industry is every answer to every question is it depends. But I'll give you the generic answer, which is basically I would recommend around 1,500 words a week. 1,000 to 1,500 words a week, depending on
So one quality article, 1,000, 1,500 words a week. So cadence in one article a week, and you just move like that.
Yeah, quality always beats quantity. right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if you create the ultimate guide, for instance, if you type in small business e-commerce SEO, right? The way we were able to write a website is we wrote a whole bunch of content to rank for that keyword right now, right? Maybe, it won't be around forever, I'm sure, because it's changing. But basically, we had to write a lot of content. I remember once we ranked for how long should a blog post be. We had to rank for basically that keyword. We wrote around 2,500 keywords, and they're always increasing. Google's always looking for people that have like such deep insight that it's like almost people are like addicted to their website, and they just click from that keyword and they just stay there. And Google's like, okay, this is definitely a website that knows what they're doing, depending on the keyword, right? If it's like weather, right, then what's the weather in New York? No one's going to stay on your website for long. But in e-commerce, right, you want people to stay around.
The average time for the visit, that's for sure. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add for the merchants? Or perhaps we didn't cover much about like local SEO. Even though e-commerce you can sell worldwide, there is still very often a local aspect, even more so with COVID, that people want to buy local and support local and so on.
Oh, I mean, we're just getting warmed up, when it comes to how much I can add about SEO. So we can talk about local real quick, right? And then we can go back to content and then back to technical, et cetera, right?
Sure.
So for local SEO, let's pretend you have a store, right? Like, so for the microphones thing, let's pretend you have like a store like Radio Shack used to, I guess, before they kind of fell off. But let's pretend you have like a microphone store in person, right? That is definitely useful, right? So you want to get on Google Maps, you want to answer all the questions, you want to get the reviews, right? Definitely want to get those things, right? You want to get something called local citations. Local citations meaning you want to get on as many local directory type websites as possible, such as Yelp, such as MapQuest, right? Everything you want to get on there, right? So there's something called the NAP, which is the name, address, phone number. You want to make sure the name, address, phone number is synced up across all the different websites, right? And you want to make sure, obviously, the number one thing I would say for local businesses that have, are also e-commerce, because we do have those clients that they have their own online shops and they also have local, they're generating millions of dollars in person as well. You want to make sure that you actually focus on Google Maps first, I would say, and then go in and build out all those local citations second. But basically, for the local strategies, right, it's still the number one thing that still does matter is, I would say, your reviews, right? The higher your reviews are on Google, the better, So the danger is with these reviews is for some websites, it's a lot harder, right? Like for Yelp, it's a lot harder actually to get Yelp reviews, but that would be my main strategy for getting local traffic.
Would you like incentivize customers with loyalty points or whatever to give you reviews?
Yeah, you just have to be very careful, right? There's the terms of services, right? But yeah, you could say, hey, one of my favorite tactics is basically, there's a bunch of different softwares out there. You can just Google this up. I'm not going to advertise any of them, but you can go in, you can simply, the software's right after the purchase, right? It'll ask, hey, what did you think of the experience? Anything we could have done better? And then it's like a smiley face or a frowny face. If they pick the smiley face, right, then they're like, thank you so much for enjoying the service. And then they can go leave a review on Facebook, Yelp, et cetera, right? Any site. If they pick the frowny face, then it turns into an email, right? That goes straight to the business owner for local, stores and shops. So, there's a whole bunch of different types of softwares that some do it with stars, et cetera, right? That you can use as plugins, to your e-com store that I think could really help bolster local, and also be very valuable, because the question is, it's, two main questions that I really love to ask clients. Number one, how did you find me? Right? Because I want to make sure that I'm very easily found. Right. And number two is, why did you choose to go with me? Why did you choose to go with my business? What do you love about my business? To accentuate those things, for the microphone website, for instance, what you purchased from my website, right? What did you enjoy about the purchasing experience? Oh, I enjoyed that the price was cheap. Okay, great. I got to go and figure out how to get the cheapest prices now, right? Or, oh, I enjoyed your expertise. Okay, great. Maybe we make videos to teach people even more about these microphones. I've learned that in SEO, which is why we have done also ad campaigns, even though, SEO is like a big strength of ours, right? I've learned that in SEO, people hire me not just to get traffic, but to get sales. So these are key questions to ask, and then basically when you're writing your content to go back up to content, right? Just generically to get your e-com sales, right? You've got to think the same question when you're writing that content, right? I talked about the outline, the H1, the H2s, the meta title, the meta description, the length, right? But is that actually a valuable piece of content? Because sometimes people will hire writers for very cheap, right? In fact, I know a guy internally, basically who pays around like 1 cent a word, for these articles. He gets them very, very cheap.
That's outsourced. It's not American made.
Not American made, I will say, but the question is, right? Actually, one of his writers, though, is basically just a person with nothing better to do. They have a married spouse who takes care of all the bills and they're just bored. I guess, that's a pretty lucky writer to have. Eventually, when they don't get bored and they want to be worth more, right? It'll be tough. But still, right? 1 cent a word, right? The question is that actually valuable content in and of itself? Sometimes in the SEO world, right? People get so focused on the SEO itself that they lose the whole purpose, which is there's actually a person on the other side, right? That's looking through and trying to do something and get something from your website. So that's where the art and the science comes in when you're writing your meta title, when you're writing your content.
And if you don't have quality content, you could actually hurt your brand. Like if you're endorsing that article with your brand's name. So especially if you are a quality brand, you cannot do bad SEO tactics and just saying, oh, let's get a lot of cheap articles out there. That will hurt more than help. It can help a little bit the technical SEO for your Google ranking, but it's going to hurt the brand in general.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. You tell me. Have you seen any websites do that in your experience where they're just kind of have poorly made content?
It's rare nowadays. There's always a person that tries to see to exploit the system or things like, oh, I'm going to have white text on a white background, and can I exploit that? So, well, you're 20 years late to the party with that technique, so that doesn't work. Don't do those shady stuff. Do real marketing nowadays.
Yeah, I would say, I know people, I don't know about white text on white background, but I've seen people, thinks that keyword density still exists, for instance, where you're coming in and you're just spamming the same keyword over and over again, right? And we've seen that that's just not true anymore, right?
Which was the idea of like hiding a lot of keywords like that to increase your keyword density, white text on white backgrounds. So nobody knows all that spammy SEO text was there. It's a very old crap back in the days. Yeah, but that doesn't work. Like Google cut that out a long time ago.
So that's key. The other thing I've seen people do though is they basically go ahead and they just write a ton of content, right? Thinking that, hey, if I just write a ton of content, I'm magically going to get traffic. And in some cases, actually, I have seen that work, right? Where you produce a ton of content and then you just get picked up for, secondary, or I would say tertiary keywords. For instance, right? Like if, we had when we actually owned a knife store at one point, right? Internally, we started our own e-commerce store called Habanco, and then we sold it. And what we would do is we'd write about knife laws, right? And then, we bring the people in through the knife laws. We didn't talk about specific knives, Rambo knife or whatever, right? Butterfly knife, et cetera. But we just write about knife laws in every state. People would find us and then, we'd make thousands of dollars in sales that way. So we generate a ton of content. So that is a strategy. So if you're going to go for a cheaper type of writer, make sure it's something like laws, something not, and even then, I would say be careful.
Yeah, be careful. You don't want the guy to write something that's not true and it's about law.
Yeah. Exactly. That's true. Right?
Yeah, it's hard to cut on cost, like to have lower quality. Like I believe you have to maintain your quality standard and still commit enough resources that it's worth it. Like if you publish just 1 or 2 pieces of article, you might be lucky in it. But that's like winning the lottery. If you're just going to write 2 pieces of article, you perhaps might as well not write any.
Yeah, long term, you're going to lose, right? But what I meant is basically you got to have a good templatized system, right? If you're going to go for a cheaper writer, you want to have a good templatized system to actually train them and onboard them, so that when they do write articles, they get better over time, and then you have a really good editorial process. That's how you balance that out. The other thing that's interesting with content, I've helped people even buy e-commerce websites, and then even monetize them further. And real passionate writers can make a huge difference, right? So, our buyer, one of the buyers that I've worked with, basically he's looking for, do they have a YouTube channel about the content, right? And do they have videos with it, right? Now you're a real passionate expert, and it's almost what I actually like to say also is like you're building a community. I think the best marketers, they actually bring the community together around the topic, right? And they just have so much, they bring so much passion into it. And I think the best companies do this as well. Like Apple has a whole Apple community of Apple nerds, that are just proud about Apple, right? And that's, I think, the real goal, what you're doing when you're building great content on your website through SEO. It's really community building,
I agree with that a great writer or a great person preparing content can make a huge difference. And you don't necessarily need, when it comes to, like, especially if it's video stuff, you don't necessarily need the crazy setup, the most professional camera and all that stuff. You need good sound, obviously, good lighting, but like, it does not have to be a lot of expenses. Like, I believe people often block at trying to make that too perfect corporate video, like it's a movie trailer or something. So, that's not the case. Just start generating content. You can have a little tight clip microphone for $20 will do the job, and you could use your iPhone or whatever phone you have to record with that, so it's hooked and you have good sound and good lighting, and there you go. Just start recording on a blank background.
100%, right? And so basically, as you're building the content out to your site, and let's say, we want to rank for Blue Yeti microphone, right? So we wrote that beautiful piece of content, has the meta title, meta description, all that stuff, right? And now the next thing we check for is do we have any broken pages on our website? Like, do we have any 404s? You don't want any of those. You want those to be 301 redirects, right? Is the URL, does it actually contain your keyword that you're trying to rank for? Does it say Blue Yeti, or does it say like just a bunch of random numbers in there, right? So you get the technical component right. The website's fast, et cetera, easy to navigate. Then the next question for the link building would be, are you actually building links to that page, or are you building links to the homepage? Because number one, the strongest page on a website is going to be the homepage. However, if you want to rank for Blue Yeti 2021 microphone or whatever, right, then you have to build links to that exact page. Yeah, and that's where link building can get trickier, right? And that's where sometimes maybe you got one microphone website that's super powerful and you're like, my website's super powerful. Why is this weaker website ranking? Well, they could build links just to that one specific page and rank you for and I'll rank you for those products.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, is there anything major that changed in SEO like in 2021? We had those crazy updates back then, the panda and this and that and the penguin and like what is there anything big that happened this year?
Yeah, great question. So actually, in a month and a half, so basically about June, right? There's actually a mobile page speed update coming, and a speed update basically, right? Called Web Core Vitals. So you guys should Google that, right? And so speed is going to be more, and I was talking about technical. Actually, also speed is going to be more essential than ever, according to Google, right? And it's scaring some of my partners into saying, hey, we should write a blog post about this right now, so we can rank and help, optimize for speed. Because oftentimes when we get a client, we do have to optimize them for speed, right? And then mobile page speed matters more than ever, right? Back in Penguin days or whatever, right? You didn't really think about mobile as much, right? Still desktop or whatever, right? Now mobile becomes more and more important. Everybody is even more on their phones. All the high schoolers coming out, they're just born, on their phones every day. Go to the bathroom on your phone, wake up on your phone, driving on your phone.
That's supposed to, but yeah, right. That's so true. We've already received some requests, and we got our first few clients just to help them optimize their core vitals on their e-commerce store. Yep. So yeah, I do see the wave coming in for that.
Yeah, those are great clients, by the way. Most people don't even think about that kind of stuff.
It's typically a customer that has an internal team dedicated to the website, and then they say, okay, well, we need an external expert to fix or improve our Google Core Vitals now and make our site even faster. And then they do a lot of other stuff in-house. So we're talking successful merchant that has enough money with their e-commerce store to say, I'm reinvesting a lot more in that store, and I have internal staff typically and so on.
And they have the foresight though. One thing I would say is it depends on your business, depends on the tactics you need to use. If you, for instance, right, if you're a huge company, right, and huge by my, vocabulary is anything over 1,000 employees, right? Then you can afford to have multiple people writing multiple articles, doing a bunch of PR internally, et cetera, right? And the link building tactics, right, are going to change there, right? Because now you can hire PR people, right? You can basically go in and you have a huge vendor list, right? Like with one of our big clients, they have a huge vendor list, and we can go through their vendors and say, oh, we want a backlink from them, right? And you can just so easily, right? And they already have a ton of authority too. So the article is just going to rank overnight. If you're just starting out and you're a solo person, right? Then you've got to be very smart, right? Maybe you start with Google Ads to try to get actually at least, some kind of profit on your website from ads. So then you can fund the rest of the thing. That's where I would actually start, right? And then also you can use that as keyword research. And then at nighttime, when your ads are going, you start writing content and you build your own YouTube channel and you become the most passionate about this insular, singular focused topic. And so that's the last thing I guess I'll say, because I don't want to take up the whole day for you. But basically, right, for content, link building, and technical, the tactics will change depending on the size of the company. So, yeah. And there's my alarm clock for 9.
Right. Okay. So would you have, let's say, a different package for those companies, let's say a $1 million a year company, a $10 million a year, we're talking just, let's say, online sales, and then you have maybe a 50 million a year, and then the bigger one.
We scale. Yeah. The hardest clients from here are the smaller ones, meaning let's say they have 5 or 10 people, but they're refuse to do the work. They're like, they want $100,000 worth of work, on a $5,000 budget, not going to work. Maybe we do one short-term project with some education involved, right? And then I give them the ball and then they do the work, right? Because, nobody is just going to give you free money and just for doing, SEO really easily. It doesn't work that way. So that's the hardest part. But yeah, we custom scope every single thing.
Yeah, I believe SEO is becoming more and more like just true traditional marketing. But by the way, it happens that instead of promoting a store, you're just promoting an online store. And it's sort of the same thing. You do the press release, you do the articles, you do the magazine, you do a video, and you just try to get a buzz online about this thing. You're producing content, and like there's less and less like tactics of the moment kind of deal, and just true marketing effort, but it happens to be online, but it's still just true marketing.
100%, especially with COVID, right? That everybody's even more online now. It's not even, I used to, before COVID, actually, believe this or not, I used to have people tell me, like my industry not really online, the online doesn't really matter for my industry. And there's still some few small industries, right? But e-commerce, obviously all online, right? But then post-COVID, now everybody understands online. And then when you look at stuff like radio ads, where it's harder to get the statistics and the analysis, right? Yeah. With today's online marketing, right, you can actually get all the analysis, which is why we always do an analysis before we even custom quote anybody anything. We have to grade them on the content, the technical, the link building.
Okay. So it's not just more of the same. You will also change the approach based on the size 100%. Of the company.
100%.
Cool. So to wrap it up, is there any last thing you'd like to share for SEO?
I don't know if the audience has noticed. I keep talking about content, technical, link building. That's basically the last thing I'd like to share. Is basically those are the 3 things you should constantly be updating and studying and trying to be the leader of in your field to be the best SEO in your category. That's the main thing. I mean, I get a lot of common questions. Like, hey, how do I know something should be a landing page or a guest blog post, right? And a lot of time, and the answer to that is you can study like the results, right? Of based on the keyword, right? But at the end of the day, if you keep learning, right, and you keep dedicating a specific focused amount of time on SEO, it will pay off. I've always seen it pay off.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, Vlad.
Thank you so much.